So thank you so much. It's an honor to present before you, and it's an honor to be here. It's been just a wonderful year. We're already lamenting, all of us, all the fellows, all the members and visitors are all lamenting having to leave. But it's okay. It's okay. We'll work something out. So anyway, so this is my talk. Prisoner Reentry is a social institution and the making up of the ex-offender. And just to give some context about this picture, this is a snapshot of the Tin Man from The Wiz. So if you haven't seen The Wiz, it's the black remake of The Wizard of Oz from the 1970s. Michael Jackson is in it. Diana Ross. It's just a wonderful film. The focus on the Tin Man here is the idea is much like The Wiz. You know, when the group of marginalized souls make their way finally to the Wizard of Oz, they figure out they had all the things that they need. They didn't need behavioral interventions. They didn't need extra intelligence or heart, etc. They had what they needed. But anyway, we'll move forward. And so my agenda for today will be for us to rethink the scale and consequence of carceral expansion. And to do that, we'll center and redefine prisoner reentry, which has been typically theorized and defined by leading criminologists as an event that happens in the lives of almost all prisoners. This was an important intervention to define it in this way, as an event. This is apolitical. And in this way, they could marshal a coalition of folks across the political spectrum to invest in reentry, for example, services. But reentry, I argue, is more than an event. Reentry is a process, and I'll explain why. It is, in fact, a social institution. And I'll talk about what that is and why over the course of this talk. And then we'll examine its work in the lives of the black and brown poor specifically. And again, I'll make this argument that reentry is itself a social institution, that reentry makes up a new humankind, the ex-offender. And toward the end, we'll talk about the ways in which reentry has redefined citizenship for the large and growing members of this population, something that I've written about as carceral citizenship. This work is largely inspired by the black feminist tradition. And when I say inspired, I mean that I could not have discovered what I discovered about the reentry process without attending to similar concerns that black feminists have been concerned with for many, many years. And in this way, they're concerned with the experiential, legal, organizational, and institutional arrangements, of course, with history, the body, notions of one's relationship with time or temporality, and ideas of identity. The problem is that when we tend to think about feminist research or intersectional research in particular, to borrow from Kimberly Crenshaw's formulation of the ways in which one might approach this, we tend to think only about identity, but all these other things are particularly important. And I use this to help me understand what I'm looking at. And so my argument will be that carceral expansion has left impoverished black and brown people, increasingly poor whites as well, materially and symbolically stranded, that this new social arrangement, these new social arrangements and new modes of clinical, scholarly, and folk inquiry have given rise to new social forms, and that the ex-offender is a thing. It has emerged as a new humankind in the carceral age, and that we have to think about the ex-offender in this way. And then finally, reentry has given rise to a new form of citizenship. What I've talked about is carceral citizenship. And so to understand this, we have to remember, following the black feminist tradition, that any social category, but the ex-offender, like all others, are both situated, sentient, and if this is the case, that means that they suffer. So they're situated. This means they operate within a context. They are sentient, meaning they think and feel, and finally, if this is the case, then they suffer. And differential suffering gives us a place to intervene in through policy intervention, programs, etc. And so, to begin the talk, we'll start with a quote from my favorite black feminist and my favorite social theorist, James Baldwin. He says, "It comes as a great shock to discover that the country to which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life and your identity has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. You realize that you are 30 and you are having a terrible time. You've been through a certain kind of mill, and the most serious effect of it is not the quote, catalog of disaster, what he will later call the, quote, bloody catalog of oppression, of which we are all too familiar already. He names the policeman, the taxi driver, the waiters, the landlady, the banks, the insurance companies, the millions of details 24 hours out of every day, which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. And it is not that. You are 30 by now, and nothing you have done has helped you escape the trap. And as far as you can tell, nothing you can do will save your son or your daughter from having the same disaster and from coming to the same end. My work follows Baldwin in that I attempt to examine this mill. In this case, I'll talk about prisoner reentry. This is a list of some of the work where I take up some of the concepts that I'll discuss today. But I study reentry for a reason. And this is because reentry, what I'm arguing is a new catalog of disaster. Occurs across multiple sites, and it involves multiple actors, but these actors and sites are largely unaccounted for. My argument is that reentry has largely transformed the social landscape, and with it, all of urban sociality in particular, but also rural sociality where incarceration rates are particularly high. In other words, the ways in which people come to interact with each other is fundamentally different as a result of carceral expansion. Despite this, prisons and police get all the action. Now, it's important for prisons and police to get all the action. We know that there are 2.2 million prisoners. That was as of 2014. We know that the incarceration rate is 716 per 100,000 in this country if you count jail incarceration. This is incredible. This is many times higher than any other developed world. But to understand the argument that I'm going to make today, we have to really put the prison in its place. So this is just a bar graph of the number of prisoners who are currently incarcerated, 2.2 million at the last count. But if we compare this to the number of people on probation and parole, we see that there are twice as many people, more than, on probation or parole. 4.7 million people as of 2014 were actively on probation or parole, being currently monitored and managed by some sort of supervisory services. But if we compare this, and this requires shifting the unit of analysis from a point-in-time count in a given year to the number of people who pass through an institution in a given year, we see that jails, detention centers, and police station lockup facilities arrest, incarcerate, and release up to 12 million people a year, 11.8 million people at the count in 2012. It's a lot of folks who spend anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks to a few months, in many cases several years, if you're Khalif Browder, for example, right, locked away in a jail cell. Switching our unit of analysis again, which in some ways is unfair, but this is to give some notion of the scope, to the number of people now who have currently a felony conviction. 19.8 million people are estimated to have a felony conviction in this country. Right? 1/3 of which are black Americans, and this number represents 1/3 of all black American men or African American men. So 1/3 of all African American men now today currently are estimated to have a felony conviction. We've known this since 2010. This isn't what gets our attention. It's the police and the prison. And finally, the number of folks with a criminal record of any kind. This would be anything outside of, say, a traffic violation, a misdemeanor offense or something like that. One has the record, a criminal record. The FBI compiled these statistics in 2014 based on data from 2012, and they found an incredible 79 million Americans currently had at that moment, at the time of the analysis, a criminal record. So what this means to me is that community is where the action is. And the prison, despite its significance, I mean, it's very important for us to study prisons. There's absolutely no question about that. But the prison is just one relatively small slice of a vast carceral network. So we have to rethink entirely the revolving door because folks don't just come from prisons. Does this make sense? When we talk about the revolving door, we typically think, are you rearrested? Do you get sent back to prison? But these folks didn't get rearrested and sent back to prison. They got sent back to one of these other multiple sites. So if we look at the 2014 Bureau of Justice Statistics report that traced about 400,000 people across 30 states, we find that there was a 77% recidivism rate after about 5 years. This means 77%, nearly 80% of the folks were rearrested within that 5-year period. But what's striking, right? And there's something about how quickly one goes back to prison. Over half were rearrested within the first year of all folks who were rearrested, and about 1/3 were rearrested within 6 months. This is incredible in and of itself. But what's striking to me is that 44% of this sample of recidivists had 10 arrests on average over this period. What does it mean to be arrested 10 times over a 5-year period? How does one hold a job or interact with their family? how does this transform the ways in which people interact with each other? So we have to account for the pervasive and cyclical nature, not just of arrest and imprisonment and release the one time, but of arrest, confinement, release, and frequent and subsequent rounds of reentry as one returns back to community over and over again, is removed from community over and over again. It alters the urban landscape. It transforms all of urban sociality. But what does this look like? So this is a place where I study. I study the city of Chicago, and this is a map of Chicago from the 2003 Going Home study. And the areas that are darker and darker highlight are areas that have the highest concentration of returning prisoners. So there are about 45,000 prisoners in the state of Illinois. 35,000 are released each year. A little fewer than 35,000 are arrested each year. So slightly more people are released from Illinois prisons over the last decade or so than are admitted. Of the 35,000 people who are released, half return to the city of Chicago, and half of them to just 6 of 77 community areas. These are the 6. What does it mean? What does it mean for thousands of people to return to just 6 low-income neighborhoods? This is also where we place help for these folks. We put reentry programs in these neighborhoods. This is a wonderful thing to do. One needs to provide help, support this kind of thing. But what does it mean to be arrested from, returned to, and rehabilitated all within places like the place you call home? And I say like the place you call home because on average, formerly incarcerated people move 3 times in a given year. It's a whole lot of time to move. There's a high level of sort of residential mobility, but for the wrong reasons. So further, what does this look like? This is the National Inventory of the Collateral Consequences of Conviction. This is curated by the American Bar Association. It is the number of laws. It is the number of laws by state, laws, policies, and regulations, administrative sanctions, et cetera, that target people with criminal records. The National Inventory of Collateral Consequences went up last year. As of today, there are over 48,000 laws, administrative sanctions, and regulations that bar people with criminal records from participating in the political economy and social and family life. But all politics are local. In the state of Michigan, also a place where I study, in the city of Detroit in particular, but I also follow people around Ypsilanti, Flint, et cetera. And we see that there's 789 unique laws, administrative sanctions, and regulations that bar formerly incarcerated people from things like jobs. 350 laws target jobs. These are 350 kinds of jobs people can't have, or areas of employment. 301 that limit acquisition to business licenses and property rights. When we think about entrepreneurship, how does one do it? Owning property, for example, engaging in real estate. 120 that limit political and civic participation. It constrains which boards people with records can sit on. More than just a franchise. Of course, in many states, one can't vote. I think about 13. And then 45 that limit access to housing. So this is housing, employment, and civic engagement to change these kinds of laws and policies. Are all limited. This is the state of Michigan, but this is the state of Illinois. 1,400, right? Which include 583 that limit the acquisition of business licenses and property rights, 556 that target employment, 186 that limit political and civic participation, 54 that constrain family and domestic rights. It's very important. This is whether or not one can foster a child or adopt, whether or not one can live in the house with a child, and all of these don't revolve around just sex offenses, for example. 21 that limit access to housing. This is a state-by-state comparison. So what does this all mean? It means that prisoner reentry is not just an event that happens in the life worlds of the poor who get caught up in the system. That in and of itself is a tragedy. This means that given the number of prisoners cycling between jail or prison and some poor urban community, prisoner reentry has become a normal social arrangement, a normative social arrangement, like the family, like the labor market, like education, arrest, incarceration, and successive rounds of prisoner reentry are normal social processes for poor people in the United States, and these have extreme consequences. What this means when we think about the laws, regulations, and administrative sanctions that bar them from access is that they become dependent on others. And as one becomes dependent on others, they become vulnerable to their whims. So third-party actors have immense power in the lives of the formerly incarcerated. This is largely unaccounted for. I do think I'm the only person writing about this. So employers, landlords, criminal justice actors and agencies, licensing bodies and government officials, families and social service providers all have inordinate power in the lives of the formerly incarcerated. And this is because of interpretation of liability law, which I'll talk about in a hot second. This is the new catalog of disaster. Remember, Baldwins, police officers, landlords, landladies, Western Union service clerks. Everyone has power over the lives of a black American under Jim Crow. But these third-party actors have immense power in the lives of formerly incarcerated people under this new penal regime. It's fundamentally alters social interaction. This is because if there is a law that excludes one from employment, should I employ a formerly incarcerated person, I am doing them a favor. There's a kind of economy of favors that circulates in these spaces that need to be adequately theorized. Again, I'm the only person writing about this. Therefore, the ex-offender must put others at ease through every interaction that they have with them. So it goes from the formal exclusion to the informal shaping of interactions. These interactions look like this. When you talk to someone who has a criminal record, they typically undergo a kind of performance where they do a few things, especially if you're an employer. They let you know that they have a criminal record, right? They say, I was formerly incarcerated. They tell you the nitty-gritty of all the crazy things that they did. Typically, I was the worst of the worst. I was a terrible person, right? And then they share their come to Jesus moment, right? Where they change their lives and they turn themselves around. And they prove this to you by engaging in kind acts. I now volunteer at soup kitchens. I put my body on the line as a violence interrupter. I work in a reentry program myself. I was a jailhouse lawyer helping people to get their lives together, right? So the ex-offender has to operate in such a way that puts you at ease so that you'll help them. Third parties, therefore, have incredible leverage in the lives of formerly incarcerated people. And I'd like to distinguish this finding from findings from other research, particularly the research on stereotype threat. There's really interesting literature on stereotype threat, which is incredible and fantastic and important. And basically what it says is that the person who belongs to the marginalized group has the burden of disproving the stereotype about their group to others. So for example, if women are considered bad at math, they've tested this to see how bearing the burden of this stereotype weighs on for example, women or minorities. So a set of cognitive tasks will be administered, and women will be told before they're given the cognitive task, women are bad at math. And it turns out that women do poorly on the cognitive task, or do worse than they would have done had no one ever mentioned, women are bad at math. It turns out that men do better when you say women are bad at math on these cognitive tasks, right? Absolutely, right? And so it's the same thing for every other stereotype group, every other racialized group, gendered groups, these different populations that have stereotypes about them. And so in the very famous book, Whistling Vivaldi by Claude Steele, he gets this, the title of the book comes from an anecdote where a black man is walking down the street and he's worried, as black men tend to worry, that other people are threatened by his presence. And so how does he relieve the other of the burden of their fear? He begins to whistle Vivaldi, right? And this signals to the other that he's okay. He's not like the others. He's different. And again, this has negative health effects, carrying this burden, et cetera. But for the formerly incarcerated, they can't whistle Vivaldi. It's not a perceived kind of criminality. It is a proven criminal conviction. Right? There's no way out in this way. Now, helping puts others at risk. This is the deep level of vulnerability that I talked to you about. So the employer does a favor to the formerly incarcerated person because the employer is put on the hook for the actions of their employees. This is an interpretation of liability law that's happened since about 1980. And so what happens is that employers are made responsible for the actions of their employees at the workplace, as are landlords, right? But at the same time, the structural arrangement that poor people find themselves in and the constraints that are associated with that means that if I'm a formerly incarcerated person and my felony conviction bars me from public housing, as it does in most public housing authorities, including New York, that is now running a pilot program to see if they can reverse some of this and what the effects might be. This means that if my wife lets me sleep on the couch, she can be evicted. So there's high risk involved in helping the formerly incarcerated person. So I have to tap dance, right? If I have a record, I have to prove to my wife that I've changed my life. I'm a good guy. It's not like it was 10 years ago when I got out the first time, right? But the stakes are even higher for the formerly incarcerated because they're at once dependent on others, but they're also undesirable candidates for help. because of interpretation of liability law, because of 48,000 rules and restrictions that bar them from doing it. This is a largely unaccounted for kind of vulnerability. An argument with a partner could equal a bout with street homelessness, right? A problem with a coworker could equal a loss of a already scarce work opportunity. A missed appointment or pissing hot that's having ingested some contraband substance like alcohol. If I go to check in with my parole officer. If I miss my appointment with them, I can't tell you how many appointments I've missed with my graduate students, right? Or pissing hot. It's not on purpose. It's, blame the head and the schedule, not the heart, right? But this could be a trip back to prison. A misunderstanding with the case manager. This could equal a loss of a job, food, transportation, drug treatment, counseling, or even family reunification services. I might not even be able to see my kids if I mess up this relationship. I am vulnerable to the whims of others. So I wanted to know how this works. And I wanted to know what were its broader implications. And so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to bring you with me into just to give you two examples of how this works in the lives of people, how this vulnerability is worn and how this vulnerability is expressed. And we'll begin with not the research, right? But we'll begin with a lesson that I learned in my life as a, quote, practitioner. I was a volunteer chaplain for 5 years at the Cook County Jail. And this was how I got introduced and interested in the world of prison life, prisoner reentry, and the such. And the lessons that I learned in my practice would come to animate my research. So I'd like to tell you about the first day that I experienced working in Division 10. This was the maximum security wing of the Cook County Jail. The gray steel doors closed behind me. The guard in the all plexiglass observation room buzzed me into the two additional gray steel doors separating me from the men. Some of them sat on stainless steel tables playing cards, others in front of their doors, leaning one foot on the deep brown cement floor and one on the sallowy white cinder block. I gave the call for chapel. The men walked over to greet me. I was a youngish, late 20s at the time, religious volunteer. So the men came over in groups of 2 or 3. We chatted about their court cases, their families, their art. There was a particular prisoner who liked to draw Care Bears for whatever reason. And when it was time for chapel, we stood in our circle, held hands as was our custom, and began to pray. We prayed for a million things, for their families, for their court cases, etc. And so, for our trials and temptations. At that point, one 20-something inmate asked if the group could sing a song. I, of course, obliged. He left the circle to go over by the cell door, his back to the cell, one foot on the floor. He began to pound the other foot against the thick grayish metal cell door, which made a loud rhythmic thud. The men began to clap on the offbeat, and they sang a song. I won't sing the song for you, but I will tell you the lyrics. You can't worry, my God. No, 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 you just have to wait. You've been waiting so long, but no matter how long it takes, he's a God you just can't hurry. He'll be there, don't you worry. He may not come when you want him, but he's right on time. I was caught up in the beauty of the moment. There with the men, my men, on my first full day in maximum security, singing a song together, holding hands. I would learn the words of that song over time and sing them with them. But years later, these same words would come to haunt me. It was a cliche. God comes in God's time. You have to wait. He may not come when you want him, but rest assured, God is always on time. Learning to wait would come in handy for the men. And the men would use this lesson that their time is, that there is an on-time God that comes in the nick of time to save you, to help make sense of their powerlessness. As they waited and waited and waited, indeed, this waiting was clear inside the jail, but extended far beyond it. Whether it was for the 10 months that it took for the dope dealer Lorenzo Rob to come to court and testify against him, he would eventually do 2 years on that bit, 10 years on that bit. Or for Philip to get some time with his public defender, he faced a 77-year sentence for a double homicide, and it took him weeks to get his first appointment. These men had to learn how to wait. But even when they got out, they would continue. I met Jimmy Johnson years later, a short, affable, pudgy African-American man in his late 50s on the day that he was released from mandated drug treatment in Detroit. We met at a bus stop in Detroit on a 6-degree day. He had traveled an hour to meet me, glad to participate in the interview session for the $40 gift card that I would give him. that he could spend like cash. He had a dual diagnosis, drug addiction and bipolar disorder, which was made by a community mental health program before he started his 8-year prison sentence and on a property-related crime. When he got to prison, the clinical staff, likely a mental health worker, told him, "You don't have a mental health problem, you have a drug problem." They took him off his medication. He spent the next 8 years in prison with no pharmaceutical treatment for his bipolar disorder. An agreeable and generally upbeat man no one seemed to notice. It took a perceptive probation officer who, after meeting with him just one time, told him, "You've got a real issue." He was ordered to report to a community mental health clinic, a different clinic from the first one where he was first diagnosed, because that clinic had closed. After an intake interview and a psychological assessment, they reconfirmed his bipolar disorder and put him back on medication. I met him right before he was newly diagnosed. We met at the downtown bus depot in Detroit, a hub where people transfer from roughly the center of the city to take buses to other routes in other parts of Detroit. Detroit works like a spoke. It's sort of a spoke system. You come into the middle and shoot out to different neighborhoods. I was to follow him to his first mandatory visit to a community mental health clinic for outpatient clinical services, and then to a workforce development agency because his parole officer required that he try to get a job. We walked a mile from the bus depot in the dead of the winter, likely the coldest day of the year. He was underdressed. He had on a hat, a thin baseball-like black jacket, no gloves or a scarf. While I was grateful to learn about his life, I was cold and so was he. We made our way to the building, a high-rise monstrosity with no visible light in the windows from the outside. By the time we walked the mile from the depot to the building, we would learn from the sign posted on the front door that the building was, of course, closed. The closest social service center was 9 miles away. There was no phone number on the sign for him to call, and even if there was, he had ran out of minutes on his cell phone. He was counting on the $40 gift card I was handing out to turn on his cell phone, which would have cost him $30, leaving him $10 to eat until our next appointment, which likely wouldn't have been for several weeks. If I was not there, he would have had to walk to the bus depot and use Detroit's notoriously unpredictable bus service to try to make his destination. I decided to give him a ride, mostly because I was cold. Without me, he would have had no bus fare, meaning he would have had to either walk the 9 miles or miss an appointment for what he interpreted as a mandate from his parole officer, risking re-imprisonment. In short, he was completely dependent on me and my whims and the mood I was in to not only get from place to place, but to avoid rearrest, to communicate with others, and to eat on that particular day. There's a deep level of vulnerability that has to be accounted for. In this case, vulnerable to my whims, to my, quote, goodness, to my liberal or moral sensibilities that this man needed a ride. And this combination of precarity and derision amplify the stakes of each interaction. And again, this is not stereotype threat. You can't prove to, say, the other who does not have a criminal record that you did not engage in crime. You have been convicted of a crime. The formerly incarcerated can't convince you. Therefore, they have to take responsibility for their criminality, insist that they have changed their lives, right? And prove to the other that they engage in good acts. And in this case, Joe would talk to me over time about the girlfriend that he would take care of and the cousins that he would work with and the kids on the street that he would talk to as a, quote, old head, doing the best that he could. This is implemented in formal ways as well as informal. So we've talked now about the informal. In the last couple minutes, we'll talk about how this is implemented in formal ways. So if we think about the reentry treatment scene, we have to think about the strategy that reentry programs, for example, use to reform formerly incarcerated people. And they typically use a human capital investment strategy. What this means is that they invest in the skill sets of individuals to help them muscle their way out of poverty, despair, criminality, and all the things associated with their criminal record. And so what reentry programs seek to do is to change lives, right? This is through social skills development, sometimes referred to as life skills, employment readiness training. They get people ready for the worlds of work by teaching them how to shake hands, how to look people square in the eye, how to write resumes, right? And through CBT programs or cognitive behavioral therapy programs like criminal thinking, thinking for a change, moral reckoness therapy, some forms of drug treatment. These are all behaviorist interventions. But what they don't do is they don't prepare the worlds of work for the formerly incarcerated, all the while preparing the formerly incarcerated for the worlds of work. And so employability training unseats employment placement. Social skills development and life skills development. I teach a formerly incarcerated person how to balance a checkbook, right, without engaging in the labor market in such a way that makes him attractive to employers beyond his personal skill sets. But it's not just the reentry program that promotes this kind of personal change and transformation. We see inside prisons that formerly incarcerated people are expected to enact in ways that show that they care. This is a death and dying in a California prison. These are the gold coats from California Men's Colony. These are prisoners who are trained to engage in hospice work, largely showing others that they are caring people. And they talk about this as not a job, but a lifestyle that they learn to take on as they care for others. But it's not just through the formal expectation that they engage in a particular set of performances, right? But it's also through the informality that arises out of resource constraints inside prisons. So when I talked to Mateas in New York City, a public health worker and a public health activist, I asked him what got him into this kind of work. What got you into activism? What got you into giving back? He says, I always wanted to be a social worker. That's how I started off. I said, how'd you get into that? He said, in prison, if I wanted any growth, any intellectual stimulation, if I just wanted to get out the cell, all I could do was be an HIV peer counselor. There was no other routes. All he could do was engage and help toward others. We even see this in the activism of formerly incarcerated people. This is Yusef Shakur, who's an amazing activist in the city of Detroit. But even as a, quote, revolutionary black activist, he talks first about changing oneself. In his book, and he's written a couple books, he talks about transforming from a predator to a protector, that the way to transform one's community is by first transforming yourself. And he tells the story of his own transformation and change consistently. We see this in the ways in which they reach the lost. They provide mentorship, the visible commitment to community improvement. This is a book bag drive that he hosts. Even best-selling stories of personal transformation and change from the formerly incarcerated. The story that we expect from the formerly incarcerated is the story of personal transformation and change. This is Shaka Senghor's best-selling book, now in paperback. It's a fantastic read. Life, Death, and Redemption in American Prison. It's called Righting My Wrongs. He made it to Oprah's Soul Sunday. And he talked about the moment that he had the epiphany, where he was able to change his life. These are the folks who speak for the formerly incarcerated in changing the system. This is Glenn Martin, who does incredible work, leading with conviction. His position is that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So what does this do? This is my close. What we see is the emergence of new ways to be masculine that come out of, I'm working with men, that come out of one's vulnerable position. This is not the hypermasculinity that though that certainly exists in the space, that's typically associated with men with criminal records. Rather, men are taught to be emotionally intelligent, intellectually curious, caring, and altruistic. They give back to others. This is the expectation. But what this does, not just the masculinity, but the vulnerability plus the expectation on the other side, is it makes up a new kind of person, right? This is more than just talk or classifications or labels. This involves interaction. When asked about how one might become a new kind of person or how one might make a new kind of person, Ian Hacking, a philosopher of science, says that there are 5 loose categories. There are people, there are classifications, there are institutions, there's knowledge, and there's experts that create. And when these things converge, we see the creation of new kinds of people. Well, if we examine the ex-offender, we see that there are millions of people labeled ex-offender. That's the 79 million. The classification is in wide use and has been, but it especially exploded after the 1970s. We see novel institutions within which they interact, reentry programs, the law, altered family life, etc. And there's stereotypical knowledge about them, right, that they are in need of this kind of transformation and change, this kind of behavioral modification. They are also the subjects of experts and expertise, and this goes from criminologists to folks like me, to good ex-offenders themselves who provide services. What these sets of conditions have produced is not just a new kind of person, the ex-offender, who occupies all these different categories, but a new form of citizenship. We see that alternative restrictions, 48,000 laws, not to mention, in other words, an alternate legal alternate legal universe for them to occupy. 48,000 laws, not to mention the requirements of their release, which are not codified in law. Alternate rights. Prison realignment was based on inadequate housing and health care. So once incarcerated, the state interprets it to having a right to provide things for you. Even alternate responsibilities. This is giving back, convincing one that they're good and doing good works. In short, we have made a new kind of person, a new form of citizenship. And this has altered the social landscape. It not only shapes the ways in which they are understood by others, it shapes the way that they understand themselves. So I'll end with this. Dante is a resident at a residential treatment program. He was angry at the ways in which treatment was taking place, so he decided to speak up. And he said, hey, when I got here, I was like, F this group stuff. Forget all this giving back. Forget all this transformation. I'm going to go over to the tech center and get my black butt up out of here. The tech center is where they go and apply for work and these sorts of things. Then he stopped and he thought to himself, I don't know S about no computer, man. So I had to sit here and do these groups. I need these groups, man. That's all I got to say about that. That's all I got. And that's all I got. Thank you.